about how he's trying to tear down credible sources for news, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNN, the people who have been pushing an attempted coup by the CIA. They've been part of this circular, well, it's not even logic, the circular process where they create a fake dossier that's funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign. They kind of launder that through British intelligence. There's your foreign conspiracy. Then that gets leaked to the Washington Post, New York Times, and CNN. And then based on those newspaper stories about the leaked fake dossier that came from Hillary Clinton, they get a Fisa search warrant to go after President Trump. So I wonder why President Trump is attacking them. Well, they've been attacking him for a couple of years and committing, I would say, crimes in terms of what they did. They have been colluding with the criminals in the intelligence and law enforcement agencies to try to overthrow our election. And they're still doing it. And they're pretending that they didn't get caught. That's the amazing thing about all this. RT talks about the Facebook ban on Alex Jones. Others, they said it's a modern day book burning. They said it's a form of that. They said Facebook, citing company policies on hate organizations, has now banned InfoWars, Alex Jones, Milo, Louis Farrakhan, others, said if that wasn't bad enough, now merely posting a link to InfoWars content could get you into trouble too. As the commentator here, this is an op-ed piece at RT, is out of Ireland. She says, when I criticized the earlier bans against Jones, I prefaced it by saying I wasn't a fan. But she said, this is straight up censorship and it should be condemned regardless of anyone's personal feelings towards the targets. And she's absolutely right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As one person tweeted, I think you pronounce her last name as Phetasy. It's P-H-E-T-A-S-Y. Bridget Phetasy, I guess. What she had to say was, I'm fully creeped out by journalists cheering censorship. Well, let me just say this. They're not journalists. They're fake journalists. They're people who can't win an argument, they have no ideas, and they have no real news. They're called CNN, amongst others. We're going to talk about the conservatives coming out, talking about this as well. We have Danielle Ryan, an Irish freelance writer based in Dublin, Ireland. She is talking about the Facebook bans on Alex Jones and others on RT. She said, when I criticized the earlier bans against Jones, I prefaced it by saying I wasn't a fan, lest anyone assume my words were tantamount to an endorsement of his content or opinions, but there should be no need for such a semi-apologetic disclaimer. This is straight-up censorship, and it should be condemned, regardless of anyone's personal feelings toward the targets. Quite frankly, I don't want to see Louis Farrakhan or anybody else banned. I think that they need to be refuted. I think they need to be debated. And if you start taking out people that you disagree with, that you don't like, even if they're racists, there is no end to it. And of course, Farrakhan was put out there to try to make this appear that this isn't just against conservatives. It was done as another tactic to smear Alex Jones by linking him with Louis Farrakhan, essentially implying that our views are linked to his in some way. As this writer from RT, Danielle Ryan, goes on to say, she said, the initial ban on Jones was an attempt to test the waters to see how people might react to a popular figure being wiped out on social media. When establishment journalists whooped and cheered in celebration, Facebook and the rest were emboldened. Consequently, we are now sliding down the slippery slope of internet censorship at a frighteningly quick pace. And they're still cheering. Most news reports on the news ban have framed it positively, as Facebook is, quote unquote, taking action. You heard the clips that Tucker Carlson put together. What took them so long? Why didn't they shut down speech that I don't like a long time ago? Because I've been so impotent in terms of opposing what I disagree with. I can't defend my positions. Please save me by silencing my opponents and the people that I disagree with. What took them so long, right? Finally doing the right thing, yeah. But if they really care about internet censorship and they want to make the strongest possible argument against it, conservatives will also acknowledge that this is not just a left or right issue. And this is she's exactly right. I've been saying the same thing that Danielle Ryan is saying here. You've heard me say that on this program. This is not a left-right issue. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. Yes, the Silicon Valley oligarchs, the masters of the universe, as Breitbart likes to call them, They have been given this power, and they will wield it to reflect their personal prejudice. But understand the people who gave them this power, and many of the people who have been censored, and this has all been happening now in less than a year. I mean, it was August the 6th that this first happened to Alex Jones and InfoWars. And now it is rolling out. It's getting broader, and it's getting deeper in the way that they're doing this. And, we're a full, We're just 9 months. We're 9 months into this. And look at how rapidly this cancer of censorship is metastasizing. How it is spreading to different organizations that are not simply just conservative, not simply Trump supporters. It is spreading to all kinds of news organizations, and they're exactly right. This is not just a left or right issue. And it will be not be limited to that either. When we lose the principle of free speech, everyone is in jeopardy. And this is why the establishment that wants to call itself the center of this country is so incredibly dangerous. So incredibly dangerous. We'll be talking about this more when we come back. Stay with us. I'm going to get into Venezuela coming up in just a little bit as well, because that's what they don't want us talking about either. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. To all those people on the left, especially those people in Hollywood, who think that this is your only way to win the debate, understand that eventually you're going to lose the debate as well, especially if you are on the side against foreign wars. Now, a lot of these people are not. A lot of these people who are leftists are pretty authoritarian, and they're allied with the military-industrial complex as well. But as Danielle Ryan in RT is pointing out, an Irish commentator, she says, if conservatives really understand this, they will have to acknowledge that this is not just a right or left issue. Facebook has taken extremely worrying steps against anti-establishment leftists, against anti-war activists, and socialists on the platform too. It tweaked its algorithms in a way that sent traffic to socialist government accountability and other progressive pages plummeting. Dissent, in other words, is the target. Anybody that doesn't take the position of the Pentagon and the mainstream mockingbird press is going to be taken out of the debate. Quite frankly, I don't want to see that happen. I can win the debate against socialists. I can win the debate against communists here. And I don't want to lose the First Amendment because we are unable to defend the basic principles of freedom and liberty. I'm not going to give up liberty in order to defend liberty in this country. Yes, I understand socialists and communists are enemies of liberty, but we don't cut off our nose to spite our face. I mean, come on. You can't give up the basic principles of America in order to fight these people. That's how the terrorists win. The terrorists win by creating a climate of fear. They were very upfront about this back in the 1970s. They said, we're going to cause you to shut down your society because you're afraid of us. And then people will turn on their governments when the governments become authoritarian. And what have we done now? We've had all these terrorist events, many of them conducted as false flag events by our own government in order to justify taking away our liberty to give us safety and security. And now that safety and security is being offered to us in the form of, we'll give you a safe and secure social media. And the only price that you have to pay for that is to lose your freedom of speech. Give up your liberty, we'll give you safety. Folks, to the extent that you give up your liberty, to that extent you become a slave. Slaves are never safe, and of course they're never free. You're going to put yourself in prison in order to be safe? How pathetic is that? That is truly the mindset of a slave. And if conservatives want to embrace that, they have embraced slavery. We can defeat the left. We can defeat them with the truth. We can defeat them in the marketplace of ideas. And we've been defeating CNN. That's why they've been pushing their censorship agenda so hard against InfoWars. She goes on to say in 2017, Abby Martin's former RT show, which covered issues like fracking and inequality and police brutality and U.S. war crimes. See, that's the key thing. You go after the police state, the surveillance state, and the military-industrial complex and its endless foreign wars, they will take you down. And you can be conservative or you can be liberal. That That is the metric for whether you're going to be censored or not. I'm telling you, it's not being conservative. It's not being a Trump supporter. They're taking that down. That's a warning to President Trump that he must not embrace an America First policy, must not protect the borders here, the U.S., and he must get involved in foreign wars. We've got to have a war with Venezuela. We've got to have a war pushed with Iran, with Russia, and so forth. They want that tension. If they don't want a full-on hot war, they want the Cold War back because that creates an arms race for them. It's not enough to have a war on terror. You know, as the Soviet Union collapsed, just like Venezuela is collapsing in the late 1980s, 1989. And, of course, you had Bernie Sanders honeymooning there in 1986, just before it collapsed, celebrating, singing, "This land is your land, this land is my land," without a shirt on. It's pretty comical. This guy, it's amazing to me. Amazing to me that he's gotten as far as he has. Just goes to show anybody can become president in the United States, right? But as that was all collapsing, the military-industrial complex here was very freaked out. I mean, they had lost a big profit sector. All those intercontinental ballistic missiles, all the warships and the airplanes and so forth, to fight a big enemy. You know, you got to have the enemy there. I mean, that's the whole thing about a good superhero movie or something. You got to have a good villain. Well, they had a good villain, but the villain collapsed because of socialism and communism. So then they needed a war on terror. They got that, but that still doesn't give them, they can send in military equipment to all the sheriffs and all the police departments. They can militarize the police here in America. They can create a massive surveillance state. There's a lot of money in that, a lot of power in that as well, but just not enough money and power, because you can never have enough money and power. It's just like John D. Rockefeller. Journalists ask him, you're the richest man in the world. How much is enough? And Rockefeller said, just a little bit more. Well, that's the way it is with the military-industrial complex. Just a little bit more. Not even a little bit more. They want a lot more. And so they wanted to start that Cold War back up again, and they've got it going now. As Danielle Ryan goes on to say, leftist Venezuelan news websites stand against the Washington consensus. Venezuelan news sites that offer an alternative perspective on U.S. involvement in Latin America have also been targeted by social media. Facebook temporarily suspended Telesur and Venezuela Analysis without cause last year. Twitter also suspended a number of official Venezuelan government and media accounts. And again, I have opposed these people. They are liars. They are thieves. They are, in other words, socialists. I'm being redundant here when I say liars, thieves, and socialists. That's what socialism is. It's a lie that is based on envy. And if you envy these other people and you tell enough negative stuff, but then you convince yourself that you're entitled to steal from them. But of course, that loot, that booty doesn't get handed out to the people. It's kept by the Chavezes, the Maduros, and the Ortegas who ran Nicaragua. They're the ones who wind up with billion-dollar trust fund kids who are jetting around Europe while the people in their countries are starving. We can defeat these people without censorship. We can defeat these people without invading their country. And if they're going to act like that, they are a prime example of why we don't want to have socialism, why we don't want to have Bernie Sanders or any of these Democrats who are running our country. Because we don't want them running our country into the ground, as socialists always do, as they're doing in Venezuela. She also retweets another individual, Yasmin Mohammed, who said, "I grew up in a world where speech is censored. It is not a good thing. It's what you expect from dictatorships, though, but not from supposedly liberal-leaning entities." Well, just understand that when we use the term liberal used to mean freedom, as in liberty. Liberal education used to be what you would get in college. They would teach you the tools of learning that would liberate you to be able to pursue your lifelong education. But now, a liberal education is not one that opens your mind and gives you tools of learning. It's one that keeps you deliberately dumbed down and puts blinders on you and tells you what you will think. It's very authoritarian. That's what the left has become. And finally, Danielle Ryan says, this is only going to get worse. We have already sketchy CIA-linked organizations like NewsGuard that are giving quote-unquote trust ratings to websites. You got an algorithm, just like Indiana University. They're bot or not. Is it truthy? Is it hoaxy? We've got Facebook giving social media ratings to people. They are rolling out the social media credit scores. This is not just about InfoWars. This is not just about news organizations. It's not about freedom of the press. This is about your individual freedom of speech to be allowed to see what they say is evil, to hear what they say is evil, and to speak what they say is evil. We'll be right back. All right, so if we're going to ban anybody off of social media and the internet that we accuse, and I don't know where the court is where we get to have this adjudicated, where do we get the due process where there's nothing in the First Amendment that says that you can shut down somebody's speech for being hateful or for being rude or for being annoying. I mentioned how you got a local sheriff here in Texas who decides that he wants to send a guy to jail for a year and charge him $4,000 under a Texas law that says, hey, if the speech is annoying or rude or hateful, then we can do that to you. No, you can't. No, you can't. We should not allow that. That's against the very principles that this country was founded on. And, it's against what the First Amendment is about. But if we're going to say that we can do that without having any due process for anybody, and it can be done by big corporations, a big corporation can label you that way, and they can unperson you off of the internet. If we're going to say we're going to do that based on hate, violence, calls even to terrorism, then I suggest this. Unless and until Facebook and Twitter and Google ban and purge the CIA, the NSA, and the Pentagon off of social media, then just shut up about all the hate, violence, and terrorism, because the people who are pushing hate, violence, and terrorism more than anybody are the CIA. They just tried to overthrow our election here in this country. They've been overthrowing government after government. They've been creating death and starvation across the globe my entire lifetime. And those people are allowed to be on social media? There is no more hateful group than the CIA. As this commentator on RT goes on to say, Facebook's reasoning and references to hate speech and promoting violence also fall flat when you consider the U.S. government officials use social media to call for military action that will result in mass violence and death on a regular basis. And they aren't just promoting it, they're actually doing it. And as Danielle Ryan says, when Alex Jones starts going outside and killing people in mass rampages, then come back to me about banning him. But see, that really is being done on a regular basis by the CIA. And when you call somebody on it, as I called Madeleine Albright, you put up a blockade, boycott, sanctions and so forth against Iraq. 500,000 kids were estimated killed. She didn't say, it wasn't 500,000 kids. No, we didn't kill 500,000 kids. Just said it was worth it. It was worth it. You let somebody like Madeleine Albright on the internet, don't even talk to me about Louis Farrakhan. Yeah, I don't agree with his racist viewpoints. Probably hates me because I'm white. But he doesn't have a body count behind him like people like Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton. It doesn't even get started with that. Have actor Rob Schneider made some great points, saying we're in a real Orwellian nightmare. Well, of course we are, but he was a little bit more specific than that. He began by retweeting Cheryl Atkinson, who said, when did we decide as Americans that it's okay for government and third parties to censor and to curate our information? That we cannot be trusted with unfiltered information? That we should only be able to find information that they tell us is true on matters that are opinion or can be legitimately disputed? And then Rob Schneider said, yeah, we are in a real Orwellian nightmare of censorship. Be careful who you label and smear today. You will be smeared tomorrow. And then he went on and it got a bit better. He said, this is just bizarre. We got progressive Democrats who once stood for civil rights, liberty, free speech, now standing for censorship and removing parental rights. Exactly. As I've said many times, the only choice that Democrats support anymore is the choice to kill babies, even after birth. Infanticide is all they support. They do not support your rights as parents to raise your children the way you see fit. They don't support your rights as parents to make health decisions about your children, or even to make health decisions about yourself while they prattle on about women's health in a fake support of abortion. And then it goes on to say, Rob Schneider says, free speech is all speech. The UK and Australia don't have protected speech, and we're not protecting our First Amendment here in the United States either. Another actor, James Woods, banned from Twitter, of course, as you've seen. He was one of the individuals that President Trump defended. Because what did he say that got him banned? Well, he said, if you try to kill the king, you best not miss. Hashtag hang them all. Now, they say on Zero Hedge that this was an apparent reference to the Mueller report. Well, I don't know. Who was he referring to? I mean, we all assume that he's talking about Mueller. I mean, maybe he's talking about Brian Stelter. Maybe he's talking about Oliver Darcy. Maybe he's talking about CNN in general. Maybe he's talking about the Justice Department in general. Maybe he's talking about the CIA in general. Who knows? And the question is, when they say Twitter suspended his account, they cited targeted harassment. Okay, Twitter, please tell us who you think tried to kill the king. Because he's targeting for harassment the people who tried to kill the king. You don't have a problem with people trying to kill the king, do you? Trying to overthrow the election, do you? But please, if this is targeted harassment, Twitter, Jack Dorsey, please tell us who you think James Woods is targeting for harassment. Who is, in other words, the person he's targeting is a person who put a target on President Trump, who put a target on our election, who tried to overthrow our election. That's the amazing thing about this. Again, President Trump tweeted that out. So surprised to see conservative thinkers like James Wood banned from Twitter and Paul Watson banned from Facebook. Well, you shouldn't be surprised about that, President Trump. It's been going on for a long time. I hope you'll do something about it. You do have the capability to do it, even though you'll have a lot of so-called conservatives, most of them never Trumpers, who will tell you that you don't have any power to do anything about that. And we're going to talk now about some of the proposals that people have put out there. What can we do about this disgusting situation? Where you've got CNN, Oliver Darcy, Brian Stelter, and the other puppets there, running this witch hunt. It wasn't enough for them to target President Trump and point him out. Now they're trying to take down anybody who supported President Trump. And President Trump better support people, not just to show loyalty. It's not about that. That'd be nice if he had some loyalty to anybody. But it's really about protecting our God-given rights. That's why we have government. Just because somebody has a big, successful corporation, just because they have a big bank, doesn't mean they get to steal my home. We have laws against that. We have laws against theft of property. You can't take my home. You can't take my car without a reason. Yeah, if you borrow money from them, you don't pay it back, they can take it. Of course, that's right. But they can't just arbitrarily come down. I like that. I'm going to just, or I don't like you. I'm going to take away your stuff. And that's what they're doing right now. We're saying, well, because we've got big corporations. And how did they get big? It is I've said this many times, it is a private-public partnership for censorship. These people are the velvet glove. The government, the military-industrial complex is the iron fist. The social media companies, as reprehensible as they are, as complicit in all of this as they are, as much as they enjoy this, they are the plausible deniability for the censorship that is really coming from the government. They can't do it directly in this country because it'd be too obvious. It'd be called on it with the First Amendment. But it really is a violation of the First Amendment nevertheless. Our government is there to protect our individual rights. They are our property as much as our home or our car. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I was amazed to see, this is a Breitbart article, conservatives express support for Facebook censorship. Conservatives support censorship, folks, so-called conservatives. I was really surprised to see on this list the media director for campus reform. As Breitbart points out, Campus Reform is a website that is fighting the battle for free speech on college campus. How in the world does the media director for that organization, Cabot Phillips, how does he support censorship? It's absolutely amazing to me. He's taking the tack that, well, you know, hey, they can set up the terms of service. Well, you know what? Cabot Phillips, there are rules on campus. Who makes those rules? Right? A lot of these universities that you complain about, how they're brainwashing people, how they're shutting down free speech, and how reprehensible that is. A lot of these universities are private universities, Cabot. You have a problem with that? See, I have a problem with that. Happen to think that it doesn't matter whether you are a big media company or whether you are a big university system or whether you are a big bank or a big government. You don't get to tell me what I can say or not say. And you come out and say, well, you don't like that? Go start your own university system. Or go start your own social media company, or start your own internet, or start your own banking system. Yeah, great. You know, we might just we might start this whole thing by starting our own other government, because that's how we got America. And the Declaration of Independence, they say we have certain inalienable rights that come to us because we're human beings, that were given to us by our Creator. And we create governments to protect those rights. And when the government becomes destructive of those rights, then it's not only our right to destroy that government, we can alter or abolish that government, whatever works. That was the principle on which this country was founded. And I agree with that principle. Obviously, we got a lot of conservatives and a lot of liberals who don't agree with that anymore. And so you got this guy, Cabot Phillips, and some other never-Trumpers saying, yeah, we do think these people at InfoWars are dangerous, and they violate the terms of service. Well, you know, what about that triple amputee veteran, the Iraq War veteran? Lost 3 limbs in the war. He came back. He had an organization at Facebook. Facebook encouraged him to advertise. And after they got $300,000 from this guy, one day they just pulled the plug without explanation on him. Do you think that is fraudulent, Cabot? I think it is. I think that is fraudulent. Oh, they just changed their terms of services. Because, you know, if you are going to bow down to any of the rules that Facebook does, and if they say, you know, I have just decided that I can just steal your free speech. I can commit fraud against you. I can do anything that I want because I'm big and I'm successful. And so I can do whatever I want. See, this is the problem I have with a lot of conservatives. As I've said before, conservatives think that business can do no wrong. Liberals think that government can do no wrong, and they're both wrong. Especially when it comes to big government and big business. They very rarely do anything right. And when the two of them work together, you can be sure that they're wrong, that they're evil. And that's what's going on here. This is a collusion between big government and big business, and we better understand that. Yeah, small business, I agree. You know, small business, you've got a marketplace. They've got to compete. They can't dominate it. But the big guys don't work in a free marketplace. They don't compete in a marketplace. They buy influence from the government to shut down their competitors. They get subsidies from government if they're going to do what government wants them to do. The internet was created for that very purpose by DARPA. You got DARPA projects to set up censoring robots. And of course, this Indiana University project, where they're out there labeling people as whether or not that's a bot, we're going to take that down, that's not truthy, that's hoaxy. You know, that's where they're labeling people. They won the competition from DARPA. One of DARPA's first competitions was for self-driving cars. Where do you think that's headed? That's going to be controlling us in physical space. See, right now, Google and these big internet companies that were funded by venture capital firms, some of them openly created by and funded by the intelligence community. The CIA created In-Q-Tel. That's a venture capital firm. They selected companies and funded money to them. A lot of the venture capital firms that helped to get these internet giants established had people sitting on their boards that were the upper echelon, the leaders of DARPA and the CIA and the NSA and so forth. They handpicked these people. They made sure that they got money to succeed. They probably worked with them to take down their competitors, too, behind the scenes. And they're working to give these same people the same tactics that they're using on the internet. We're already seeing being enacted by these same tech giants in China. They're using it in physical space, not just cyberspace. All you people who say, well, hey, fine, I'll just get off of Facebook. I'll get off of the internet or whatever. Well, they're coming to your town. They're coming to your physical space. Google has a project just outside of Toronto, Sidewalk Labs, and they're working on how they can apply these control and censorship and tracking methods to physical space. They're going to take over the cities. That's what's coming up next. But let's go back to this. I call these people the GOP fifth column. You know where that term comes from? It comes from the Spanish Civil War at the beginning of the 20th century. As this one leader was headed toward Madrid, he said, well, we got 4 columns heading towards the city, but we have a 5th column inside the city. In other words, a kind of Trojan horse. That term really caught on because Ernest Hemingway was there in the country writing about the Spanish Civil War, the fight between the fascists and the communists. May they both lose. Nevertheless, he was writing about that war, and he popularized that term, 5th column. It's now kind of, I guess, a 20th century version of the Trojan horse. But it's having people on the inside. That's what these people are. They are the GOP 5th column. People like Cabot Phillips with Campus Reform, the media director with Campus Reform. Here's what he had to say. A reminder for my conservative friends tonight, private companies have every right to deny you access to their platform because it's their platform. You don't have a constitutional right to Facebook or to a Twitter account. Now, Cabot Phillips, if you go to his Twitter site, the first thing he does is declare his undying love for Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a guy who pretended that nothing had happened to Alex Jones, and as he's having these congressional hearings on how conservatives are being politically targeted by social media companies, he has absolutely pretends that he doesn't even know who Alex Jones is in the hallway. And when he gets the executives from these social media companies to question them, his only concern is, you're going to do what we tell you to do, right? You're going to do what we tell you to do. He's speaking for the military-industrial complex. He's speaking for the people who put them in power. And he's saying, you're going to continue to do what we tell you to do, right? You're not going to do what China says. It is not a private company. You're being gaslighted by this 5th columnist, the supporter of fake little Marco Rubio. It's not their platform. It is not their internet. Yes, I know it was created in concept by DARPA, and they handed the tools of this, the keys to this over to them. But no, it's not theirs. Then he goes on to say, yes, it's incredibly hypocritical for them to portray themselves as free speech bastions and then to censor views that they don't like. However, they built their product, and the government should not be able to compel them to provide it to people against their will. When we come back, I'm going to break this down. I got 5 points to tell Philip Cabot and any of these other GOP military-industrial complex shills who want to put an authoritarian gag on the American people. We're not going to take your gag. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. I've seen this argument from Reason. I've seen it from John Stossel. Now we're seeing it from the guy who's a media director for Campus Reform. Other never-Trumpers are out there with us. The internet does not belong to Mark Zuckerberg, and we're not going to cede that control to him. He is trying to unperson Alex Jones and InfoWars, punish anybody who says anything positive about them. But, of course, hate speech against Alex Jones and InfoWars is highly encouraged. That'll probably get you extra social credit scores with Zuckerberg. It's the same tactics that the Chinese communists are doing because you got the same Silicon Valley techs working with them. The technocratic elite, as the big new Brzezinski pointed out, that are going to usher in a new world order. And they're doing it. They're doing it through the internet. And you've got a lot of shills who are either shilling for these people or totally oblivious to the consequences of this. I think they're just oblivious to the consequences of it. As I said, they so hate the government, and I get it. You know, the government comes in, as I've said before, we have an election. Once every 2 to 4 years, you get one choice. And you get one from column A, or you can choose one from column B. And, you make your choice. It's like, well, yeah, I agree with this guy maybe, 51% of the time, and I agree with her 0% of the time. So I'll go with the 51% here. And then you find out that you're not going to get any of what you voted for. Or maybe you'll get, half of what you voted for. You agreed with him on half of the issues, and he'll deliver on half of those issues that you agreed with him on. That's the way democracy works. And of course, in the free market, every day you're making decisions. You're always going to the grocery store, and every purchase that you make is a vote, right? And you get exactly what you want. Now, a lot of times we have buyer's remorse. We get home, we don't like what we chose, but we always get what we chose, exactly what we chose. Yeah, sometimes there's fraud in the marketplace, but you do get what you want, and you get to vote multiple times a day instead of once every 2 or 4 years to get an approximate, combination. It's almost like you went into the grocery store and they got a couple of carts for you. And, one of them is a bunch of spoiled produce. That would be the Hillary Clinton cart. And then the other cart is a bunch of stuff that you don't want, you don't need, and maybe it's going to be pretty destructive. But then there's some good stuff in it as well. That would be the Republican cart. That would be the Trump cart, And then you go home and you find out that some of the stuff that you bought that you thought was good doesn't work. It's busted. Can't figure out how to protect the border at all. And that was the key reason you picked that cart. But of course, you certainly didn't want that cart of putrid produce that was Hillary Clinton. She was past her sale date, that was for sure. But that's basically where we are. And so I understand a lot of conservatives and libertarians saying, look, I don't like government. Government is about coercion. It's not about persuasion. The free market is all about persuasion. But they don't understand that we're talking about your fundamental rights here. My fundamental rights are not to be bartered off to the highest bidder who can curry favor with a bunch of politicians in Washington. We're going to tell you how much money they're spending to get their way in Washington. Tens of millions of dollars. Got the actual numbers here. What Facebook and Google have been spending in Washington to get exactly what they want. Folks, you are our sponsors. They try to organize economic boycotts. Just last week, we had one of their fact checkers, the Southern Poverty Law Center, has now gone into retreat, thoroughly discredited, thoroughly exposed as a corrupt, hypocritical organization. So now they've got some other organizations, and they tried to enact an economic boycott against 515 websites, as I point out, from Drudge Report, InfoWars, Breitbart, Daily Caller on down, WND, many of them. Everybody that you... If they took out all those news sites, there would be nothing left but CNN, Washington Post. And, of course, they are Washington Post, one of the financial sponsors of this organization. So is George Soros. And so are the Koch brothers. Koch brothers, who sponsor these libertarian organizations, telling you, oh, well, social media, they got to be allowed to do whatever they want because they're big. They get their way. Shut up, you little hoi poi. You don't have anything to say about this. You're not a stakeholder. Let me tell you something. When you start seeing these people talking about stakeholders, understand that we are the stakeholders. We've got the stakes that we're going to drive through these vampires' hearts. And the way you do it is with free speech. If you want to support us, if you want to become a sponsor of InfoWars, we actually give you something for your sponsorship. We give you some great products that are natural, that are effective, that are safe, and we give you big discounts. Right now, we've got a special. If you get Brain Force Plus, my favorite supplement that we have there, it's a nutraceutical. Helps you to focus your mind, helps you with recall. Brain Force Plus is now 25% off, and if you buy that, you can get Knockout, our all-natural sleep aid, Knockout for free. We also have Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, one of our first products. 25% off, and if you get that X2 Nascent Iodine at 25% off, you get a bottle of Survival Shield X3 Nascent Iodine for free. We also have $50 off both the Alexa Pure air filter for your house and the Gravity Feed water filter. Very important. You never know when there's going to be something that turns up in your water, whether you're on groundwater, whether you got a well, or whether you are on city water. You never know what's going to be there. You want to filter it out before you find out weeks, months, or years later that some kind of chemical has contaminated the water supply. Very effective, and again, it's gravity feed, so it works even with a power outage. 50% off all apparel. That's hats, T-shirts, and hoodies. That's both new and classic designs. Got a lot of specials there. We've got one just for our listeners. You can get 10% off of Wake Up America coffee. That comes in two different blends. We've got a Patriot blend and an Immune Support blend. It's 100% organic, and you can get 10% off of Wake Up America coffee. Just type in the code WAKEUP to get 10% off of InfoWars Wake Up America coffee. You can find all those products at InfoWarsStore.com. Let's go back now to the comments that he's making. Hey, look, yeah, I agree, they're hypocritical. No, they're fraudulent. They're fraudulent what they're doing. Like I said, encouraging a veteran to spend $300,000 on ads and then just cutting them off because they just changed the terms of service. If they write the rules, if they can change the rules at will, then they are the rulers. And I don't think they should be the rulers. They just flushed everything that he had down the toilet. But anyway, let's take a look at this argument. He says, goes on to say, Cabot Phillips, remember the Colorado baker? I thought conservatives agreed that government compulsion is bad. Let's understand that when we go back to that 1946 case, Marsh versus Alabama, the Supreme Court said, in that particular case, you had a company that owned the town. They owned the public square. And again, as Robert Barnes has said, this is the model for control of the internet, the company town. Because they can't control our speech because of the First Amendment. They can't do it directly. So they're going to use the company town to control us. And so you really had this literal company town, 1946. And a woman was handing out religious tracts, and they said, not here. We own the public square. Go away. She fought them all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, even if you own the public square, you can't stop free speech. Now, subsequent to that, we have had situations with both malls, as Robert Barnes pointed out. We've had, California said malls can't throw people out. Well, the mall is not the public square. It's not. It's different. It's there for business. We've also had the Supreme Court case recently about the Colorado baker. It is also not the public square. That's not their business model, right? But the public square is the business model of the social media companies. Jack Dorsey at Twitter said it 8 times in just 2 congressional hearings. Our model is the public square. Zuckerberg has said that as well. We all know that that is the case. Furthermore, that is their business, creating a public square. And they have essentially a monopoly. And I would point out that it is foolish to not understand the role that the government played in establishing that monopoly. Nevertheless, it is the public square. The mall is not the public square. The Colorado baker's shop is not the public square. But there's another aspect of this. In the bakery case, for example, they were trying to compel him to do certain things. Now, when we talk about rights, we have positive rights. And that is the term that has been, they're wonderful at coming up with labels. That's the term that the statists have used. They said, well, positive rights, that means that you have a right to food, you have a right to free housing, you have a right to all these other things. No, a negative right is what the First Amendment is. It says we have these rights from God and you will not take them away. They said, oh, that's negative. Well, it is a prohibition as to what the government and big corporations can do. Welcome back. One of the things, as I said, that people like John Stossel and Reason and Cabot Phillips, the media director for Campus Reform, and others don't understand is that there is a big difference between Mark Zuckerberg and a mom and pop bakery. They willfully choose to ignore that. And, the left does as well. The left applauds the coercion directed at the mom and pop shop, but then they want to let the big mega corporations that control the internet, they want to give them a free pass, superior rights. Said, well, they can, it's their private internet and they can do whatever they want to. But now that baker over there, who doesn't have a monopoly, these people could have gone anywhere they wanted. They could have gone in there and they could have bought cookies. They could have bought cakes from him. He doesn't ask him, but they go in there and they compel him, try to compel him to do something that violates his freedom of religion, his personal religious belief. They choose him for that. Just as if they had chosen a Jewish bakery and gone in there and told him, we want you to make a Nazi cake for us. And if he didn't make a Nazi cake, they take him to the Supreme Court. They are seeking out conflict. And again, it is a business, just like a mall is a business. It is not the public square. Facebook and Twitter and Google, they are controlling the internet, the public square, and they're trying to deperson people out of that. And we've already had the Supreme Court address that, saying that even if the public square is privately owned, they can't take people out. But then he talks about the fact that, this is we don't want the government telling people what to do. And I don't want corporations telling people what to do either. So the bottom line is we have the government there to establish, to protect our rights. And as I said before, you have positive rights and you have negative rights. I don't like those terms, but those are the terms that the left has chosen for us. And so we bow down and we use those terms, just like we call ourselves red states or something, right? No, the red states are New York and California because they embrace Marxism and socialism. But of course, they did just the opposite. So they talk about positive rights and say, you have a right to this, you have a right to that, you have a right to welfare, you have a right to food stamps, you have a right to free housing at a certain level. If you want to do more than that, okay, fine, you can do more than that, but you have a base right to that. That's the idea of the positive rights, that you have a right to be given something. Well, whenever you do that, that means that you are enslaving somebody else, forcing them to pay for it. Now, what we're talking about, what America was founded on, is to say that we have rights. The rights that we have come from God. And the government not only cannot take them away, but government has a responsibility to protect those rights when they're being taken away. One of the things, as Breitbart points out, that he chooses to ignore, when we're talking about how these companies were set up and given special privileges, he doesn't mention that no bakery has ever enjoyed special exemptions under federal law, such as the social media companies enjoy under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And that's not even talking about how they got set up in business by DARPA and these other people. Then you got Rick Wilson. This is a guy who, if you go to his, he says, wow, did you see what Milo, Alex Jones, and Farrakhan posted on Instagram? No, you didn't. And he has a LOL emoji there. Well, how do you know that, Rick? You know what I've seen and what I haven't seen? See, the principle of free speech is that if you don't support free speech for people you disagree with, then there is no free speech for you either. Now, Voltaire said that. I disagree with everything that Voltaire stood for in terms of politics. He would be totally opposite of everything that I agree with. And he would say the same thing about me, but he would support my free speech and I would support his free speech. And if you don't support that, you won't have it either. But this is a guy who calls himself GOP media guy. And his big book was Everything Trump Touches Dies. That's his big book. And he is still, if you look at his Twitter account, he is still pushing the fake news, the bias, the lies, the conspiracy theory of Russiagate. Yeah, that's why I say these guys are the GOP fifth column. We'll be right back. We'll talk about who it is politically correct to hate, because there are people that they encourage you to hate on Facebook. Not besides Alex Jones and InfoWars. They're encouraging you to hate other people as well. Welcome back. As I said, we got a lot of conservatives and libertarians who are saying, hey, it's the internet is, these guys have won, so just surrender to them. They're going to set the rules. They're going to set the terms of service. They're going to be able to change those terms of services anytime they want. And, they're going to set up a list of who's naughty and nice. And if they say that you're naughty, there is no appeal. There's no system. And they can unperson you, as they are doing now to Alex Jones and to InfoWars. And so then the question becomes, as InfoWars is saying, we got conservatives. Some conservatives are saying, that's just fine. We're happy with that. Because, they're private companies, and private companies can do no wrong. That is beyond criticism. Yeah, I just cannot understand how these people, well, I do know, because a lot of them serve people like the Koch brothers, and they push and subsidize think tanks, conservative and libertarian, who will put forward that kind of excrement. But as we look at InfoWars, as you look at some of the solutions, we got Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri saying, asking, how is it possible to keep the digital platform free of criminal activity without inserting their own political biases into the editorializing that they're doing. And so they're looking at this and saying, yeah, we got this, what do we do? How do we allow free speech from criminals out there? Well, let's understand that speech itself is not criminal. Now, if you're organizing and you're calling for hate, that should be something that is used by the police to go after that person, not just simply to ban their speech, right? But they're not doing that. I'm going to give you evidence of how hate speech is actually not only tolerated, but supported and promoted by Facebook. There are certain groups that it's okay to hate, besides Alex Jones and InfoWars. Christians, primarily. And understand that there is a great persecution that is building up for anybody that these people don't like. And you can put Christians on that list as well. They've got a long list of people that they hate, and they're promoting that as well. But when we look at this, let's just understand that you're not going to ever keep the digital platform free of criminal activity. That is a fool's errand. That is not a choice. How do we, on the one hand, keep the internet free of criminal activity, and then on the other hand, but if we try to police that, we're going to be enacting censorship. So I've got a choice here of censorship or criminal activity. No, that's not the choice. And when people offer that choice to you, you better call BS on that, because they're offering you a false dichotomy. People who want to control you will always give you two choices and say, well, it's either this or this. And usually both of those are bad choices. They want you to pick the lesser of the two evils. And that's not always the case. Look, you're always going to have criminal activity. If somebody is trying to organize terrorism or an attack against somebody, or if they're engaged in pedophile trafficking or something like that, the very fact that you've got the internet there, that gives them a chance to go after that particular person. It's kind of like the red flag gun laws. See, the guns are not the problem. The person is the problem. So you don't arrest our speech. You don't get rid of the First Amendment. You don't take away our guns in the Second Amendment. If there's somebody that's dangerous, you go arrest them and you give them a due process trial right away and determine if that person is dangerous. Because if they're dangerous, taking away their gun isn't any help. They can still get a car, or they can get a bomb, or they can get an axe, or they can get a club, a baseball bat, and they can kill people with all of those things. If the person is dangerous, the person needs to be red flagged. The person needs to be picked up. The person needs to be examined. Given, confront them with the accusations, give them a chance to, respond to those accusations and defend themselves in court. Give them due process. You don't take the guns and do the due process later. And you don't take this free speech and do the due process later either. You got Ted Cruz, and I disagree with what was said in this article here at InfoWars. I don't know who wrote this. One of the best ways to ding Facebook is to make the company responsible for the content users post, according to Ted Cruz. I disagree with that. If you make Facebook responsible for what's put up, it's only going to make this worse. It will result in more censorship. They'll be more cautious of this, and they'll censor more to protect themselves. That's not going to help anything. I mean, quite frankly, and I'll get to it in just a second, one of the best ways to do it is actually coming from Newsom. It's not really going to make the platform free, but if you just want to punish Facebook, these other people, the new governor in California, Newsom, said we need to find a way to tax them more. That's always the way to destroy anything. The power to tax is the power to destroy. And of course, the solution from the Democrats is always, we need another tax here. So you want to really punish these guys, don't take away their 230 immunity. And because that's just going to make them even more cautious, more censoring. That's what they're going to do. No, you make the users responsible. You don't want to make the company responsible for the content that users post. Make the users responsible. And if the users are out there conspiring or calling for violent action, then you take the appropriate action. Just as you have the Secret Service when they see somebody putting something out. They come in, they interview that person, see if they're, if that was that hyperbole, was that sarcasm, or was that a legitimate threat? Are you crazy or what? I mean, that you have to make a determination about that sort of thing. But you don't. If somebody sends a death threat through the mail, do you shut down the mail system, the post office? Do you shut that down for everybody then? Is that what you do? Is that the way you respond? Or do you address it with that particular person? That's why I have a problem with this idea of Ted Cruz. That's why I have a problem with what Josh, nobody in Washington really has any, they're not looking at this as a civil liberty issue. That's the fundamental flaw here. Because we don't have people in Washington who give a flip about the Constitution or care about your individual civil rights anymore. They don't care about free speech. They want to control you. The conservatives, the Republicans want to control you, as Marco Rubio showed. They want to control you as much as the Democrats do. They just have a different agenda. Here's the Competitive Enterprise Institute, another Republican thing. It's not a civil rights issue at the moment, they said. No, they're dead wrong on that. It absolutely is a civil rights issue. They said, we've never said that the government should force companies to give people a microphone. It's not giving us a microphone. It's not banning us off of the public space. See, that's a difference. It's like saying, well, we never said that the, if you go back to that 1946 Marsh versus Alabama, Competitive Enterprise Institute would say, well, we've never said that the government should give a Jehovah's Witness religious tracts. That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. She was there. She had her own speech. It wasn't being given to her by anybody. We have our own speech. We have our own views. We have our own voice. See, this is the problem is that people in Washington don't even recognize the concept of fundamental human rights. Everything to them is a government privilege that is granted to you. They see everything as a positive right. We will give you food stamps. We'll give you education. We'll give you housing up to a certain level. And we'll give you the ability to speak. Because you don't have anything unless we, the government, give it to you. I thoroughly reject that idea. That is the most un-American of all ideas. It is the mentality of a slave, if you accept that. Again, this is a public-private partnership for censorship. That's what it really is. It's been that way for a long time. And it ignores the idea that these monopolies that have been established don't have anything to do with crony capitalism. Look, just look at Elon Musk. How'd this guy get about $10 billion now? It was $4 billion about 5 years ago. How'd he get that much money? Well, it's because he's got friends in high places. Just like Zuckerberg. Just like Eric Schmidt at Google and all these other people. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I want to get into some health news and as well as what is going on with Venezuela, but I've just a couple more things I want to say about this free speech issue, folks, because if we lose that fight, we've lost everything. We really have. And it's absolutely amazing to me to see how wide this is going, how deep it is going, and how these people are getting away with it and being cheered by journalists, by people on the left, people on the right. One of those organizations not cheering this, of course, we talked about Tucker Carlson earlier. Breitbart is also not cheering the censorship of InfoWars. They point out that they were talking about this. It was in April of last year, about a year ago. You know, they had their conference. They called it Masters of the Universe. That was a good way to approach this with these silicon censors, is what I call them. But yeah, Masters of the Universe, because, you know, hey, they've been given the keys to the internet by DARPA. DARPA, again, going back to the 1960s, is J.C.R. Licklider, a psychologist who came up with the idea of the internet. Don't tell me that this is not about controlling public opinion. It's a tool of mind control. It's a tool of narrative control, which is the way that you control people's minds. They just didn't have the technology until the late 1990s. And when they got the technology, they jumped into it both feet. The CIA created their own venture capital firm. They put their people on venture capital boards, and then we wound up with people like Mark Zuckerberg, who now we all have to bow down and worship, according to some of these people in the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Reason, Cato Institute. Oh, yeah, they've won. They won. How did they win? Well, they won because they got the government to put their thumb on the scale, to weigh in on their side. As Breitbart points out, look, we've already got these people have already stepped over the line in many ways. Number one, the outcome of the elections now depends on tech giants. And they're talking about, again, a year ago, you had Dr. Robert Epstein, a psychologist. Remember, it was J.C.R. Licklider, a DARPA psychologist who, said, hey, we can use the internet to control what people think. And this is how it works. He laid it out for people. He said, we estimated that if companies were all working together and supporting the same candidate and really pulling out all the stops, using all the methods that they have to manipulate, they could shift 10% of the voting population of America with no one knowing that they had done this, without leaving a paper trail for authorities to track. 10% could be shifted. That's a lot of votes with no one knowing that they've done this. See, that's just with the under-the-radar shifting with algorithms, making sure that you don't see certain stuff, shadow banning certain things, pulling up to the top narratives that you agree with, that they agree with. That's how they can rig the election. It's far more powerful, folks, than placing ads. That's why it's so ridiculous, this whole Russian narrative that's in the Mueller report. Oh, yeah, they bought a couple of Facebook ads and they changed the election. And you don't think that Facebook and Google, with their manipulation, their manipulation by algorithm, you don't think that they had an effect on the election? Come on, give me a break. How ridiculous is that? He said, again, going on, Dr. Epstein, Robert Epstein, the psychologist, said a year ago, he said, the fact is we don't know what rules they're applying. We don't know what their algorithms are. We don't know what their priorities are. He said, there's lots of evidence now that they are systematically suppressing political views that they don't like. And that's not just on the right, by the way. It's also progressives as well. He was saying that a year ago. It's anybody that's not part of the establishment center of mainstream Democrats, mainstream Republicans, people who are allied with the deep state, with the bureaucracy, with the entrenched bureaucracy, with the military-industrial complex that are pushing these unending wars. Just look at the way the establishment media, and I'm talking about Fox as well as CNN and MSNBC, look at the questions that these reporters ask. It's the same questions, this narrow core of issues that we're allowed to talk about every single election. There are so many issues that are never brought up in any questions to any candidates in any of these debates. They control the candidates that get into the debates. They control the questions that are asked. We never even have a discussion. Number two, they said, big tech has already meddled in American elections. Yeah, newsflash. He said, we found that Google's search results favored Hillary Clinton in all 10 positions of search results on the first page for almost all of the 6 months leading up to the election. That's enough to shift 2 or 3 million votes at least without anyone knowing that they have been manipulated. Number three, we still know very little about who is responsible for the censorship and how they're doing it. Number four, tech platforms are not free. You pay with your personal data, right? Number five, a free and open internet is a major threat to the mainstream media. This is why, and this is Breitbart saying this is not me, this is why mainstream media gatekeepers like CNN's Oliver Darcy are the most militant in their efforts to strip social media platforms of their disruptive power. They are the people, after all, who are being disrupted. They are the ones who are failing. They are the ones who can't stand up to scrutiny. They are the ones who can't win an argument. They are the ones who don't have any real news. And so they must purge anybody who is authentic. They must jail Julian Assange. He's never had to retract anything. He's never lied to anybody about anything, unlike the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC. You got Alam Bukhari at Breitbart says, link banning is now what is new about what happened to InfoWars this last week on Facebook and Instagram. Link banning. See, it was only 9 months ago that you had all of the tech people move against Alex Jones at once, except for Twitter. And then Twitter did it after Alex confronted little Oliver Darcy, the guy who was the, well, I wouldn't even call him a pit bull. He's more kind of like a teeny toy dog. that bites you on the ankles, you know. And then when you get there and stare at him, he gets over in the corner, stares back at you, and pees the floor. That's Oliver Darcy. But now they've stepped this up just 9 months later. Now they are banning links at Facebook. And as Bakari says, beyond the bans of individuals, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal when you can be unpersoned. Understand, Alex Jones is the first person in America to get the Chinese social media credit banning. How about that? How about that? Facebook has deployed an even more terrifying tool of censorship. He says link banning. All links to InfoWars sites are now banned across the platform. Share InfoWars stuff too often, and you'll be banned too. Unless you put up politically correct hate speech about InfoWars. In other words, they want to encourage you to hate us. And if you put that up, you get brownie points with them. As Bakari said, this takes censorship on social media to an altogether new level. If you post InfoWars content on Facebook or Facebook-owned Instagram, your post will be removed. If you post it repeatedly, you will be removed. You'll be banned unless you're condemning InfoWars. That's Facebook brazenly using its power to reward political positions and punish others. As I've said all along, it's about purging and about pushing. Purge some information while they, any information that they don't agree with as they push their agenda unopposed. That's what ABC, CBS, and NBC used to always do for them, the Mockingbird Press. Welcome back, folks. I was talking about Alam Bakari at Breitbart, and he is spot on. He had one more thing to say. I want to read this to you. He said, what's happening to InfoWars isn't the censorship of an individual or a group over a violation of terms of services. It is the wholesale ban of independent media, of an independent media site, InfoWars, which for all the criticism leveled against it has had a major impact on the politics of the United States. If you remember Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, we got mentioned 3 times in there. I don't know that anybody else got mentioned 3 times other than President Trump. But of course, she doesn't really think President Trump happened to her. Something else had happened to her, right? I mean, it couldn't be President Trump. But, she blames a lot of people for her loss because it was her turn. But she blamed InfoWars. We got mentioned 3 times in her book. InfoWars, this is the wholesale ban of an independent media site for which all the criticism leveled against it, InfoWars, has had a major impact on the politics of the United States. That's exactly what this is about, folks. They're changing their algorithms and they're rewarding quote-unquote authoritative sites and so forth. Yeah. And yet, when we look at what they're not banning, they're encouraging, you can put up criticism. If you got something nasty to say about InfoWars, that'll be allowed. But they're not going to allow you to post anything about InfoWars on Facebook. As the Free Thought Project points out, that Facebook is going to try to ban users who share InfoWars content unless it is, quote, explicitly condemning it. Look, we don't agree with everything that InfoWars says, I said, but nevertheless, we have never advocated for the silencing and banning of any group. And I would even, like I said before, David Duke or Louis Farrakhan or whatever, I absolutely disagree with them. The right way to treat that is to have free speech and to be able to debate that, just like with Voltaire. I would disagree with Voltaire on all of his conclusions about religion, about politics, about the way society should be structured, and yet the two of us agree that we ought to be able to talk about that openly. All of his writings were summed up in the thing, I may disagree with everything that you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. You didn't actually say that. That was a summary that somebody put in of what he had to say, but it's a very effective summary. And we don't have that spirit anymore in America. We don't tolerate people who disagree with us because we feel like we can't handle it. Is that why? Well, certainly that is the case with people like Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy and CNN. They can't handle that. Free Thought Project goes on to say, well, look, it's not just a theory that this is going to be done to everybody across the political spectrum. They said they've already done it Take a look at Brandon Straka, the former Democrat who founded the Walkaway campaign. He was banned from Facebook last year, ahead of a protest in Washington, because he had linked to an interview with Alex Jones, and they go back to the post that he had back in September. He said, Facebook just banned me as I'm planning the Walkaway March in Washington. I've been banned from posting leading up to the march. This is devastating for our ability to reach people. I was banned from mentioning my interview with Alex Jones. Can anybody help? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Mueller? Mueller? No, you're not going to get any help from people in Washington. Here's the thing, folks. We have these individual rights, and government at any level could defend those individual rights. If you get control of your government at the county level, I would suggest that you say, we're going to tax Facebook, or we're going to ban them from doing business in our area, whatever. We're going to put some kind of a penalty against them because they're shutting down the First Amendment. Try it. Do it at the county level. You probably can't get anybody to do anything at the state level either. Certainly not going to get anybody in Washington to do anything. They're not even asking the right questions. And the people who are even discussing it are giving you a false choice of two bad options. They completely ignore this. I'm not one of these people who thinks that anything that the Supreme Court says is law. I disagree with them about Roe v. Wade. I disagree with them about their definition of marriage. They couldn't get support for gay marriage, even in California, even with millions of dollars put in by Tim Cook and Apple Computer and other tech corporations that are now shutting down free speech. So they don't care what you think. They didn't care about the election in California. So they took this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, with an edict, said, we will define marriage. No, you don't define marriage. God defined marriage. That's done a long time ago. You don't have any authority under the Constitution to even give us an opinion on it, Supreme Court. So I don't really give a flip about your ruling. But all these people who bow down and worship everything the Supreme Court does and says, well, that's now the law of the land. No, it isn't. But if you're going to take that approach, then go back to 1946, Marsh versus Alabama. Free Thought Project goes on to say, last year we reported after Facebook wiped 6 million of our users away. You know, they were banned on Facebook 2 months after InfoWars was banned. By deleting all of our pages in the name of protecting the elections, we saw instances in which a child was sold on Facebook. In November, an auction was held on Facebook in which a child bride was put up for sale in a public post. People openly bid on Facebook for a 16-year-old girl. You hear that? Facebook allowed an auction for a 16-year-old girl. Facebook claims they removed the post, but not until after the auction had ended and the girl had been sold. As Fox 59 reports, according to a children's rights organization, Plan International, the girl was bid on by 5 men, some of whom were reportedly high-ranking government officials in South Sudan. Oh, what a surprise. You mean high-ranking government officials that are sexual perverts? I just talked on Friday about the connection, even at Indiana University, where they went to get this guy from Italy as a computer expert, but he also is a senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute. Yeah, there's no connection at all to perversion there, is there? Anyway, if Facebook is worried about dangerous content, then why are they openly defending and allowing actual calls for the death of billions of people? Last year, for example, writes Free Thought Project, last year the page Red and Black Anarchist posted a meme literally calling for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. And when it was reported, Facebook said it didn't violate their terms. Seriously, it didn't violate. So they can put up a meme calling for the mass genocide of people. I guess if Thanos from the Avengers had a Facebook website, it'd be just fine with Mark Zuckerberg. He'd probably say, you want to kill half the people? I thought we wanted to do more than half. I thought we wanted to do like 90, 95%. You know, you look at the Georgia Guidestones. Only half? Come on, you can do better than that, Thanos. In fact, the Red and Black Anarchist page is still up, writes Free Thought Project. They just so happen to be celebrating the recent purge of Alex Jones and the like. Yeah, say first they kill your speech, then they kill you. These anarchists, these communists, these people like Zuckerberg. Of course, as Free Thought Project points out, we're not advocating for their removal either. Although, if you call for the killing of anybody, you ought to be investigated by the government. That's the way to handle this, right? They said the interesting thing is that all this stuff happened the day before World Press Freedom Day, as if that mattered. It said all over the West, we have banning of the free press. We have Julian Assange being imprisoned, who has never said anything that he's had to issue a retraction for, never said anything that wasn't true. They're calling for the silencing, even the imprisonment of organizations and individuals who advocate for vaccine safety as well. Remember, like we said last year before all this began, writes Free Thought Project, first they came for Alex Jones. Exactly right. But there is, you can hate people, and there is a politically correct way to do it. You can hate, for example, Christians. We've got no less, it's gotten so bad that no less than the BBC and the guy who is the Foreign Secretary of the UK, his name is Jeremy Hunt, they have now said that Christian persecution is at near genocide levels. So you know what they say is responsible for it? Political correctness. That's very dangerous. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I want to stop talking about free speech. I want to talk about health now because we got some very important life and death issues. Not only did we have over the weekend, organized by Focus on the Family, we had a live from New York. It's 4D ultrasound, not Saturday Night Live, but a live from New York. Understand that, as we pointed out on InfoWars, an article from CNS, 1,485 versus 352. That is, abortions at or after 21 weeks outnumbered homicides in New York City. In other words, 1,485 murders of babies versus the overt murders that they would count of 352. So it's very important that people see what they are doing. Alveda King. She is, I believe, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King. I've actually interviewed her. Yeah, she is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King. She spoke about having an ultrasound in the 1970s at this event in New York City. They actually rented one of the big screens in Times Square and put up a live 4D ultrasound. If you don't know what 4D ultrasound is, the fourth dimension, of course, they do three-dimensional imaging. It's very hard to read the old traditional ultrasound, so they put it in a three-dimensional imaging, but then it also has the fourth dimension of time. So you see it as a movie. You can see the baby moving. You can see a three-dimensional picture of the baby moving. Yes, it does have some room for improvement, but still you can get the idea. And they pointed out that Alveda King said in the 1970s, after having a live birth, 2 abortions, and a miscarriage, she said, I saw a little baby when I had my ultrasound in the 1970s. A live baby, and I said, God, my uncle is right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. A woman has a right to choose what she does with her body, but the baby is not her body. Where is the lawyer for the baby? Excellent point. And, you know, we've got Democrats, a college biology professor. We showed the slides on InfoWars last week. The article by Don Salazar, college biology course compares a fetus to cancer and to a parasite. And you can actually see the slide there on that article. A human fetus, he said, is comparable to cancer and parasites. They put up a lecture that says, first they show the fetus, a legitimate parasite, rapidly grows, invades, manipulates immunity of mother, and reshapes blood vessels. And then they say in that same article, the cancer crashes the party. It rapidly grows. It invades. It manipulates immunity. It reshapes blood vessels. So therefore, they're the same. They're equivalent to each other. A baby is like a cancer growing in your body. So just cut it out. Right? That's the logical inference that they want you to get out of that. The reality is that it's kind of ironic as we're talking about the cancer, as we're talking about choice. These same people who want you to cut out that cancer that they would call the baby in your body, they don't want you to have a choice about what vaccines you take or to even have a choice about cancer medication. The Democrats have repeatedly shut down any right to try laws. Now, as I was talking to the doctor who is now being persecuted by the FDA and the Department of Justice for a treatment that uses your own stem cells taken from fat cells that they extract out of your body. They take the fat out of your body. We can all sign up for that, right? And then out of that, they extract stem cells. They inject those stem cells into various places where the stem cells can be used by your body to replace particular cells that are maybe the cause of your arthritis or other issues. It is regenerative medicine. It's showing a lot of promise, and it steps on a lot of toes of people who are making a lot of money selling different chronic treatments. I told you last week about the analysis a year ago by Goldman Sachs and said, I don't think that curing disease is really a sustainable business model. Look, for example, at this particular company that came up with a cure for hepatitis C. Well, the first year they made $12.5 billion, and that was good. But then it rapidly began to fall off because as they cured people of hepatitis C, you actually had what they like to talk about with herd immunity, unlike with vaccines, where you don't get that because you don't get lasting immunity. So they said it started shrinking. So we don't want that. We want a situation like we have with cancer, where we can treat people for as long as they live, even though that may not be too long. We can get a lot of money out of that. And I talked about the individual who said, hey, my insurance company spent $1.2 million on cancer treatments for me, but I was dying. They gave me less than 3 months to live. When I got my PET scan, it lit up from head to toe. The cancer had metastasized everywhere. And then on a whim, I happened to see this one particular thing in my alma mater, Oklahoma University. A veterinarian there said, hey, if you have cancer, you might be interested in this. And they started talking about worming medicine. He said, I got nothing to lose, and this is something that's been around for a long time. It's cheap, it's safe, it's effective. So he gave it a try. He said, it was costing me $5 a week. And he goes, within a month and a half, I went back and they gave me a scan, and it was completely gone. And he continued on with this experimental program that was promised that he might get as much as a year. I don't think anybody else in the program did. And they said, you are an outlier. You survived, and you're still cancer-free. And he goes, well, I got something to tell you, Doc. He said, I was taking this. And the doc said, oh, yeah, I've heard about that before. And he goes, what? You've heard of this? Yeah, since the 1980s, we've been looking at this, but there's no profit incentive to give somebody something this cheap. And I had a listener send me an article from NPR, an update on this. Actually, this is an article from January of 2017. A pinworm medication is being tested as a potential anti-cancer drug. Again, this goes back to the 1980s. They knew about this. Just like back in the 1980s, they knew that they saw a connection between glyphosate, Roundup, and cancer in people. NPR was talking about it at that time as well, but nobody did anything about it. All these years, people, again, been getting sick and dying. And in this particular case, it was a researcher at Johns Hopkins University. They had lab mice that they would give certain forms of cancer to. And he said he noticed that some of his lab animals had developed pinworms. So he treated them with this worming medication. And he said it was interesting because not only did it get rid of the parasites, but it also got rid of the cancer. That's kind of interesting, he said. So they did some phase 1 studies. That's what the FDA calls it when you look to see if something is safe or toxic. And goes, well, that was a no-brainer. It had been used for decades to treat pinworms. And so they said, we got to phase 1, but they're really not interested in going any further, it seemed like. But then they said, then there was an odd twist to the story. He had done that, and as soon as he put his findings out about how that had happened, you had a pharmaceutical company go in and buy the rights to that drug. And then it went from $5 for 100 tablets to it went from $4.50 in 2011 to $369. That kind of tells you what this is all about, doesn't it? Because they bought the marketing rights to that. It's just like the big pharma bro, Martin Shkreli, go in and buy a medication and then jack the price up. That is why, folks, you see Merck's profits soaring. They are the sole provider of the MMR vaccine, measles vaccine, and mumps. Their profits increased by 27% to $496 million in 2019, as you've got governments all over the world talking about how they can use fines to force people to take their vaccines. They're not interested in pro-choice. They're not interested in a woman's body, a woman's health. as I pointed out, as Alveda King pointed out. She said, it's not your body. There's another body in there. Where's the lawyer standing up for that body's rights, for that baby's rights? Folks, if you want to support InfoWars, we are under attack, as you've heard this whole program. If you want to support us, go to InfoWarsStore.com. We got a lot of specials there. Like I said, BrainForce Plus, 25% off. You get a free bottle of Knockout, our all-natural sleep aid. We have $50 off the Alexa Pure air filters, the Alexa Pure water filters. We have 50% off all apparel. That's hats, T-shirts, hoodies. A lot of specials there at InfoWarsStore.com. Also, for our audience, we have a particular special just for our audience. You can get 10% off of Wake Up America coffee. That's 100% organic coffee. We have two different blends. We have the Patriot Blend and we have the Immune Support Blend. Just enter the code WAKEUP at checkout to save 10% off of InfoWars Wake Up America coffee. That's it for our broadcast. Again, go to InfoWarsStore.com. You are our sponsor. And we're in a fight for your free speech, as well as a fight for the free press, a fight for the internet. We're not going to allow big government and big business to operate in a private-public partnership to censor everything that you see or hear. Yeah, it's an information war.